Hello, students. Welcome to a lecture on consumption and ownership. This is an important and very unique way of looking at economics. This idea was developed over a period of time and involved the work of 3 different Nobel Prize winners. And the idea was to look at how people consume goods jointly and how does ownership affect that consumption. So when we talk about joint consumption, we're talking about, for example, if we have a plate of cookies and there's a number of us that want to eat the cookies, how is our consumption of those cookies affected by the ownership of the cookies? What we're going to do is look at this from the standpoint of a grid. And on this grid, on one axis, we have ownership, and we call it exclusive or non-exclusive, meaning it's owned or it's not owned. But on the other axis, we have the consumption, and whether that consumption is rival or non-rival. So for example, rival would be a plate of cookies. If I eat some of the cookies, there's fewer cookies for anybody else to eat. On the other hand, if I'm breathing fresh air, I'm probably not affecting other people unless we're all in the same room together. But if I'm outdoors and I'm breathing fresh air and somebody else wants to breathe fresh air, my breathing of the fresh air doesn't really have any impact on them. And so then it's not rival, right? If I'm listening to AM/FM radio, then I'm not really affecting anybody else's ability to listen to AM/FM radio. But on the other hand, if I'm listening to XM Sirius, while I'm not affecting somebody else's ability to listen, there's ownership, right? Somebody owns that, and they can control by the means of encryption, they can control whether or not I can consume it. So these things fit into 4 categories. Now, we describe these 4 categories with 4 different terms. So if a good is rival and exclusive, then we call that a private good. Now let me stress here, the term private good here does not mean it's privately owned. It could be government owned, but it is owned, okay? And so we call it a private good. On the other hand, the extreme opposite of that would be a good that is non-exclusive and non-rival. So this would be, for example, the military for the US. The military is not something that can be made exclusive. If you live in the US, whether you pay for it or not, you get the benefits of the military. It's also non-rival. The protection you receive from having the military to protect our borders does not affect my protection. This would also apply to something like AM/FM radio or sunshine, things like that. So these goods that are non-rival and non-exclusive, we call public goods. Again, let me stress, that does not mean that they're owned by the government. These goods could be private goods like AM/FM radio, or they could be just not owned by anybody like the air outside. We use the term public to describe them, but it doesn't mean government owned. Okay, now if a good is rival, and if that good is non-exclusive, then we call that good a common good. And a common good would be something like the American bison back in the 1700s and 1800s. Nobody owned them. They roamed free across the Midwest. However, they were rival. If we kill them, then there are fewer of them. And that's what happened. The people who were traveling across the US on trains were moving very slowly, to 20 miles an hour or so. They were very bored. They didn't have their iPhones. And so what they would do is they would point their guns out the window and shoot at the buffalo as they rode by, and they annihilated them, virtually destroyed them. There was only a few left. The final group of assets would be those that are non-rival, but they're exclusive. So this would be something like a club where you belong to, say, a country club. and you have access to the club, but it's non-rival. It could become rival to many of people or members, but if you manage the membership, it can be non-rival. XM Sirius would be an example of where you license it so that it's exclusive, but it's non-rival because your ability to listen to it doesn't affect anybody else's ability to listen to it. So we have these four kinds of goods. Now, what we need to learn from this is that the goods that are non-exclusive have real serious problems, both the common goods and the public goods. Why? Because the common goods, if they're not managed and if they're not dealt with, will be consumed until they're gone. The buffalo was the example. But you could also have a situation in which you had, let's say, a lunch buffet. And you said, here's a lunch buffet. And you have 1,000 people that want to eat the food. And you say, come and have whatever you want as much as you want. Well, very quickly, a few people are going to go up there and take all the food. And then nobody else will be able to have any. And that's because it's rival, but you made it non-exclusive. But by charging a fee for it, now I can manage it and make sure the right amounts are being consumed by people. We've had a problem in Africa with some of the wild animals. Nobody owns them, and yet they are rival, because if we kill them, they'll be gone. And so what's happened is hunters have gone out there and poachers and started killing them off. One of the things that has happened in some of these countries is they have given ownership to some of these animals, these wild animals, to a specific village. And they've told the village, these are your giraffe, these are your rhinos, these are your lions, whatever. And no one else is to touch them, they belong to you. You have to manage them. Now, the village knows that there are hunters that will pay enormous amounts of money to be able to hunt these animals. But if they quickly sell off all the licenses until all their animals are gone, then they have nothing left. And so what they're going to do is they're going to manage those resources. They're going to allow just a few people to come in and hunt. They're going to make sure that their herds stay large so that they can make large amounts of money. They're going to protect those animals. Okay? Let's take an example of chickens and eagles. Chickens are rival, and they belong to people. The chickens belong to people. The eagle is rival. The eagle is rival, but doesn't belong to anybody. We have millions and millions of chickens, plenty of chickens, yet we have very few eagles left. Those protected do better. So how do we solve the common pool resource problem, the common goods problem? Well, what we've learned is we solve it by providing ownership, by giving ownership to somebody. It could be the government, could be individuals, but if we give ownership to them, then they have an incentive to protect those assets, those resources. Now, the public goods problem is a different problem. The public goods problem is people will not pay for it because it's non-exclusive, but it's also non-rival. So it's not like there's not going to be enough. And so this particular problem is one in which certain things are not going to be produced at all. Let's take, for example, a dam on a river. Let's suppose that we are all farmers in a valley and we share a river that runs through our valley. Now, this river provides water for our fields, but every 3 years or so, there's a flood. The river goes over the banks and it wipes out all our crops, costing us hundreds of thousands of dollars. We would like to stop that from happening. So how do we do it? Well, we decide, look, let's build a dam. The dam will be able to control the level of water and keep it constant all the time. No more problems. However, the dam is a public good. Why? Because the benefit of the dam is going to go to everybody downstream, whether they pay for it or not. We can't make it exclusive. And the problem is, some of the people are going to say, I'm not paying for the dam, you pay for the dam. Knowing that if most of the people come forward and pay for it, they're going to get the benefit and not have to pay for it. How do we solve that problem? Well, there's a number of ways to solve that problem. One way to do it is to have the government come in and tax everybody and say, you're all going to get the benefit of this dam, so we're going to tax you and pay for the dam, and then you'll get the benefit. The other way to do it is through contracts. We all agree that we need the dam, but there is going to be no dam unless everybody signs the contract. And until everybody signs it, there will be no dam. Now everybody has an incentive to sign. Once everybody signed the contract, now you build the dam. If they don't pay, you take them to court. These are very important concepts because as we get into different environmental case studies, we're going to discover that quite a few of them involve common pool resources or common goods. And they're being overconsumed because they don't have ownership. And we're going to also find that in some cases, we have public goods problems and that we have to address those. And that'll be part of the process of evaluating what is the environmental problem, is does it fit into one of these 4 categories?